Welcome back to As You Pass By. We are beginning part 2 of the Union Square Theater District episode. And I wanted to take a moment to visit one of the locations that we started with in this episode, which was on the corner of 13th Street and Broadway. The filming of the Star Theater demolition in time-lapse. So this film is very significant in a couple of ways, one of which it was declared a national treasure by the Library of Congress recently in about 2002, which would have been the 100th anniversary of the film. It was the first time-lapse film ever made. The company that made it was the Biograph Company, which was located right across the street at 841 Broadway on 13th Street on the northwest corner. The Star Theater was on the northeast corner. The actual filming of the time-lapse footage was done, I believe, on the street, because you can actually see 841 Broadway slightly to the left of the camera. But this was where the Biograph Company first set up its studios, and there was a studio on the roof, which is no longer there. It hasn't been there for a long time, but Biograph was one of the major filming studios of the early 20th century, and it was there were a number of very famous people who worked there, but probably the most famous was D.W. Griffith, which is where he got his start. By 1902, he was not in the city. He moved to New York City in 1907, and his sort of classic, or the film that he's most remembered for, Birth of a Nation, was in 1915. But the Biograph Company stayed at that location. Then they moved around the corner to 11 West 14th Street, and I have a couple of photographs of that. So enjoy this episode, and remember to like and subscribe. There's a little button down below, and it doesn't cost anything. Just push the button, and remember to hit like, and also leave a comment if you'd like. I always enjoy getting your comments and try to respond to all of them in some kind of meaningful way. So please enjoy, and we'll see you on 13th Street. So we're starting today on the corner of Broadway and 13th Street, and where I'm looking on the corner, it's actually pretty much where the glass area is on this building, was the very famous Wallack's Theater, built in 1861, and with about a 1,550 seat capacity, was one of the oldest and sort of grandpa theaters of the Union Square district. It was torn down in 1902, and when it was torn down, it was memorialized in the first time-lapse film ever taken. And the film itself is a historic document. As motion pictures didn't really exist in 1902, not in the form that we know of today. So the Wallack's Theater was also known as the Germania Theater, and then later on it became the Star Theater, which is the name it had when it was demolished. I'm going to show you some, the film itself is only a couple of minutes long, but I'm going to show as much as I can. It's very fascinating, and it's sort of like the theater is sort of surrendering itself for the medium that would follow after theater, and then so it sort of was a sacrifice. That's my opinion, but it's an amazing film. When I first saw it, I did not know it was even in New York City. So we're right next door now at Broadway and between 14th and 13th Street. This is where the Wallack's Theater was, and right next door was a smaller theater. Its capacity was about 600 seats, and and this was the Union Square Theater, which later became the Bijou Dream Theater. And then at its final phase, it was known as the Acme Theater. It was here until, it was actually, I remember some smaller parts of it that were remnants of the original theater that was here until sometime in the 80s. But it had ceased being used as a theater many years before that, probably in the 1950s. But, and also the configuration was unusual because the original theater was over here, and then the entrance was also on 14th Street much later. So we're going to take a look at that now. So we're around the corner now on 14th Street between 4th Avenue and Broadway, which is over here. And this is where the other entrance to the Acme Theater would have been. The entire block was taken over by this sort of multi-use building here, and I think it was finished in around 1999. But and I'm sorry that there's nothing more that's sort of current that that I can show you. There are no remnants of any of these buildings. The theaters themselves were all demolished long ago. Many of them burned to the ground, since the theaters that were here were, they were illuminated by gaslight. The buildings themselves were, some of them were made of cast iron, but a lot of them were made of wood, bricks, and they often burned down, some intentionally. So we're right across the street from where 46 East 14th Street would have been, just about where the Whole Foods is. There were several buildings on this block. Have a pretty nice, actually there's a few really good photographs of this area. And so right about where the Whole Foods sign is and the scaffolding was the site of the Automatic Vaudeville Theater, or the Automated Vaudeville Theater, and it was also known as the Crystal Palace. It was built in probably about 1910. There's very little information about this theater. It was at one point owned by Adolf Zukor, the man who would become the founder and owner of Paramount Pictures. It was destroyed in about 1923 by fire, as were many of the theaters of that era. So it had a short lifespan, and it was not a very large theater because when it opened, it was mostly a Nickelodeon, and it wasn't like a theater that you would sit in and watch movies. It had little, display cases that you could watch privately your own movie. So it never was a sort of full-fledged movie theater the way we understand that to be today. And also right next door, probably a little bit to the right, where the ambulance is, would have been 44 East 14th Street, which was the Comedy Theater. And honestly, I have to tell you, I can't find anything out about that except for one photograph where I saw it. And, I can't tell you when it was built or when it came down. A lot of these theaters were, only existed for 10 or 20 years before they were replaced by something else. So anyway, here we are on 14th Street. First day it hasn't rained in about a week. So we're over here on 14th Street near 3rd Avenue. 3rd Avenue is right over there. And you may remember from the last episode that Tony Pastor's was located just about where the parking lot here starts. I don't know if you can see it. A lot of scaffolding. This is the Con Edison building, which you can see from that sign. And over here was Tony Pastor's Theater, which was in the same building as Tammany Hall, the political club that ruled New York for many years. Maybe some say it still does. Across the street, you had at 136, which would have been over here, the Dewey Theater, which was built in about 1898, and it only survived until, and also you may remember from the last episode, that the Academy of Music used to stand here. Well, it replaced the Dewey Theater, which was here from 1998 until just before the Academy of Music was built. And right next door at 126 was the Théâtre Unique, which was also destroyed to make way for the Academy of Music. And then also, if you look over here, just behind where the pizza sign is, and over on 3rd Avenue, is where we also were standing at the former site of the Variety photo plays. Anyway, you know, I wish I had a little more interesting architecture to show you, but you know, that's life. And it's also one of the favorite pastimes of most New Yorkers is to lament all of the beautiful buildings that used to be here and replaced by these boring monoliths. Thank you, NYU, for that. Anyway, so you can see that this was really the epicenter, because right over here would have been the first Academy of Music, which was an opera house. Then over here you would have had Dewey's, the Theatre Unique, Tony Pastor's Variety photo plays, and then in 1926, the very large Academy of Music. So we're over here on West 14th Street, right off of 6th Avenue is over there, and we're in front of 107. Just to give you an idea of some of the ambient noise around here, someone treated me to a concert, and also they got the jacket. Another day in New York. Anyway, right across the street at 107 14th Street was the Theatre Francais, which was built in 1866, right after the Civil War, when New York City was badly in need of entertainment and theater and amusement. It had several names after that. It was also known as the Lyceum, along with half the movie theaters in New York City, and Civic Repertory Company. It's a little hard to speak above the noise. Anyway, I thought I would include that because, you know, it's part of daily life here. Anyway, and right next door was the old Armory, which was renovated in the, I don't know, 60s, and then finally torn down in around 1990 to make way for this building and for the new location of the McBurney Y. But it was quite an array of buildings once upon a time, because the Civic Repertory Company had a large portico, and it was quite an amazing building. It had a seating capacity of 1,600, which was quite large for 1861. And demolished finally in 1939, and then to make way for this building. But it was a very popular theater once upon a time, and also it was sort of well known for catering to pretty much of everybody in the city. It wasn't just an upper class venue. It wasn't a workers theater. It was just a combination of all different groups of New Yorkers who could come and enjoy the theater. So we're over here on Greenwich Avenue, which is straight ahead, and also 7th Avenue, which is to my right. And so technically this is not part of the Union Square Theater District, but since I was over here, I decided this is the site of the Sheridan Square, or the Sheridan movie theater, which was located over here. It was a huge theater. It was about 2,500 seats, and built in 1921, and it survived until about 1970, I can't find the exact date it was demolished, but I do remember going there once or twice when I was pretty young. But anyway, it was over here. And also, the other reason I wanted to sort of feature it is that it was sort of featured in a number of paintings by Edward Hopper, which I'll show you now. But, you know, they're pretty iconic, and he lived around here also. So a number of his paintings were of the Greenwich Village area. So anyway, it's a fun place. It had a huge interior, and now it's a park.